Hello, West Street. Great to be with you. My name's Dave, and I am Graham and Joe's son, and it's great to be with you after you've just enjoyed some breakfast. I'm looking forward to meeting you, hopefully all of you, many of you, later on today and across tomorrow, and to joining with you for the weekend. And I've been asked to share a little bit from the Bible and from words that Jesus said, just after the words that I know that you were looking at last week, the Beatitudes. This is the very next thing that he says, and I'm going to jump right into it while our food is still settling. So he said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." And then straight after this, Jesus goes on to use another image. He says, "You are the light of the world." And we're going to be thinking about that tomorrow when we are together. But for now, we are thinking about this first image, this image of us being salt. This image of where Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." And it's a powerful image, but it's a slightly strange image. See, the light thing, I think maybe makes sense to us a little bit more. You're the light of the world. Light is impressive. Light is exciting. Light does things that are noticeable. Salt, well, salt does its work by not being noticed. Salt is something which has a very hidden and almost stealthy effect. So what does Jesus mean when he says, "You are the salt of the earth"? Well, I want to think about that. And to do that, we are going to think about food. And tonight, my wife and I are having steaks. We are going to be having these for dinner. Now, these have just come out of my fridge. These are fresh, they've been chilled, they are absolutely fine. But in the world when Jesus was living, there was no refrigerators, there was no way of keeping meat cold enough to keep it sort of safe from germs and bacteria. So instead what they would do is they would take salt and they would sort of coat the steak in the salt, and I'll be careful to only use one hand to handle the meat here. But they would take the salt and they would rub it in, and when they rubbed it into the salt, and actually they would use far more salt than this, something important would happen. Because what happens when you rub the salt onto the steak is that it sucks the moisture out of it, so that the steak itself, the meat itself, becomes dry because all of the moisture has got sucked up into the salt. And what that does is it means that the bacteria or the germs or the things that might cause the steak to go bad, cause the meat to go bad, they can't survive. Everything needs water to stay alive. The meat is already dead. It's not trying to stay alive, so it doesn't need the moisture. But the things that are trying to grow in it do. And so by rubbing the salt in, by making it all salty, what it would do is it would protect the meat. It would cure the meat. And as a result, the meat could stay fresher when they didn't have fridges. So the first reason, and there's two that I'm going to share, the first reason that I think Jesus talks about us being the salt of the earth is that we are meant to be preservers in the world. We are meant to preserve things. We're meant to help them stay fresh and help them stay good. What does that mean? Well, we can look at it from both sides. If there are things in the world that are good, that are beautiful, that are meaty, that are good things, we as Christians, we as people who follow Jesus and should be the source of goodness and should celebrate what is good, we should help those things to be sustained. If there are relationships that are good, if there are situations that are good, if there are initiatives going on around us that are good things, that are good for people, that are good for the world, then we as the salt of the earth should be involved, should be making sure those things gain traction, should be making sure that they carry on. But the flip side of that is that where there are bad things in the world, where there are difficult things, where there are hard things, where there are things that are just plain wrong, we, a little bit like this salt, should be starving those things, starving those germs, starving that bacteria of everything they need to survive. So if there are things that are wrong, if there's gossip, we should be nothing to do with that. We should be starving it. If there's bad attitudes in our workplace, we should be doing everything we can to fight those things, to push those things away. Because as preservers of what is good, we need to stand for what is good, and we need to stand against that bacteria, that germ that is bad. And so then, this meat that has been preserved, that has been looked after by all of this salt that has been rubbed into it, then it can be good and it can be healthy. And this world that we live in, we are the salt of the earth, the salt of this world, then it can be holy and it can be healthy and it can be good. That's part of what our impact on the world should be. But I said there's another one, and for that one, we are going to need to head to my kitchen. Hello. The steaks are in the pan. You see, I've brushed off most of that salt because actually the steaks are meant to taste of beef, not of salt. The salt has done its job in preserving and protecting that beef. I know I had a fridge, but let's pretend for a moment. But the salt is actually also doing another job, because the salt, yes, we don't want it to taste of salt, we want it to taste of beef, but the salt actually has an important job to do in that as well. And that is where we come on to seasoning and giving flavour, bringing out flavour. I'm a little bit of a foodie, I like to cook, and what I like to do as I'm cooking is to taste things as I go along. I'm not going to do that now because it's raw meat and we don't really need to with this. But if you're making a sauce, or if you're making some kind of nice flavoury thing that has lots of things, you want to sort of balance those flavours so you taste as you go along. And if you think, oh, actually it could do with being a little bit more sour, you might add something like lemon juice. If you think it could do with being a bit sweeter, you add something like honey. If you're thinking, oh, it could do with being a little bit more sort of acidic and punchy, you go for something like vinegar. If you want it to have that sort of deeply sort of savoury, people call it sort of umami flavour, then you go for something like Marmite, secret ingredient in lots of recipes. Or if you want it to be a little bit more savoury, if you want the flavour just to sort of be a little bit elevated, often what chefs will use is salt. That is what will be a key ingredient. And so a lot of people who like to cook will always have a little bit of salt to hand so that they can just bring out some of the flavour and season things. And that's because of the way that our taste buds work. See, it's not that we want it to taste of salt, it's that the way that our taste buds work is that if you bring about certain tastes in your mouth, it can bring out the flavour of the food you're eating far better. So weirdly, if you add salt to beef, the result is that it becomes more beefy, and that's what we want. So actually, even though I scraped off most of that salt, some of it would have soaked in and it will bring out that flavour a little bit more. I think they are ready to turn. There we go. Let's have a look at these. Yeah, nice. So why am I rabbiting on about salt and about seasoning and about flavouring food? Well, it's a similar thing that as I think Jesus is wanting to get across when he talks about us being salt of the earth. Yes, it's about preserving. It's about that curing that we talked about already. But there's also something about bringing out flavour and vibrancy. See, salt, yes, it protects and preserves, but it also just makes life better. It makes eating nicer. It makes flavours more vibrant and more exciting to get our mouths around. And so when we think about being the salt of the earth, another thing that Jesus is saying is that because we are there, because Jesus' followers are in certain parts of the world, those parts of the world should be better. Whether that's a country, whether that's a neighbourhood, whether that's a workplace, whether that's a hobby group that you're part of, whatever it is, our presence can make things better. Joy, hope, humour, perseverance, friendship, marriage, all of these things are good things. They are good things given by God. And when we embrace them, when we embody those things, when we are joyful people, when we are humorous people, it can bring about life and vibrancy. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get fed up of Christians having the reputation of being buzz killers and of being killjoys. Yes, I've met those Christians as well. I know they exist, the kind of Christians where you go, yeah, I know you believe in life after death, but do you believe in life before it? But the truth is, we shouldn't be that way. That's not what Christians are meant to be like. We are the salt of the earth. We should be flavoursome. We should bring out the beefiness of beef. We should bring out the joy of friendship. We should bring out the faithfulness of neighbourhoods and communities. We should bring out the ethics of our workplaces. We should be the very best, because God is the very best, and he has made us to be his ambassadors in the world. So salt protects and it preserves, but it also brings out that flavour. And with that, I think my steaks are ready. Well, I didn't think I'd make you watch me eat every mouthful of my dinner, but I can assure you it was very tasty. The beef was fresh, it had been preserved by that salt. Well, I know fridges, but hear me out. And it was tasty. It was beefy and it was seasoned and it was really, really nice. So, a successful meal, all because of some salt. One last thing to share with you. One last thing that Jesus says about this salt is he says that if salt loses its saltiness, then it can't become salty again. It can't do its job. It can't achieve what it's meant to achieve. There was a phenomenon that would happen at the time, and they didn't understand the science of it then, but we know a little bit more about it now, where salt particles, or at least things that look like salt crystals, things that look like that would sort of be residue from the sea, but actually didn't have any salt in them. But they looked the same on the outside. So there was salty salt, and then there was other stuff that looked the same as salt, but seemed to have lost its saltiness. It wasn't quite what had happened, but it looked the same from the outside. And so really Jesus is making that distinction between salt that is truly itself, that is doing the thing it's meant to do, and salt that doesn't have any of the chemical properties of salt. And if it doesn't have the chemical properties, then it's not going to dry out that meat so that it can't catch bad things. And if it doesn't have the saltiness, if it doesn't have that chemical properties, then it's not going to flavour anything. It's not going to season anything. So Jesus says we've got to be really careful to make sure that we stay salty, that we stay distinctive. So I want to give you 3 questions to think about as you continue your conversations and your time together right now. The first question is, what opportunities do you see for Christians to be a preservative in our world? Second question, how can you as a follower of Jesus add beauty, vibrancy and tastiness to the world you live in? And what can we do to make sure we remain salty and don't lose that distinctiveness? Enjoy your time thinking about those questions, and I'm going to go and do the washing up, but I hope you have a great time talking about that, and I'll see you later on and tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.